And this is a listening session for the Portland City Council to hear from the public on our upcoming budget process and to hear some of the priorities and the interests of the people of the great city of Portland, Oregon. So without further ado, I'll introduce our facilitator today, Jen Gray O'Connor. Good morning, Jen. Thank you for being here today.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Weiler. I'm just going to provide an overview of our agenda today. I'll read some of our rules of conduct for the meeting today, and then we'll open it up for Mayor Weiler and members of our council to provide some opening remarks. After that, we'll hear from Budget Director Jessica Canard to give us a Budget 101 to get us started. Then we'll hear next from invited public testimony, followed by some open public testimony on any topic. Then before we close, we'll hear again from our members of council and Mayor Weiler to do some closing remarks. But I want to make sure that everyone knows that there will be additional opportunities to have your voice heard. There will be another budget listening session that'll be held on Monday, April 18th. That will be from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Then followed by on Thursday, May 5th, we'll have the mayor's proposed budget hearing, and that'll be from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And then finally, on Wednesday, May 11th, from 1 to 5 p.m., we'll have the approved budget hearing. But then at any time, if you want to provide testimony, you can do so online at portlandoregon.gov/CBO, or at any time you can email testimony to budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. Okay, first, just to ground our meeting, I'm going to read you our electronic meetings notice as well as our rules of conduct. So under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. So all members of council are attending remotely by video or teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. This meeting is also available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, as well as www.portlandoregon.gov/video and channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony at any time to council on the budget at the budget office website, portlandoregon.gov/CBO, and by email at budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit that in-person contact and promote social distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare and requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. So thank you all for your patience and your flexibility and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. So just to ground us all in some of the rules of conduct today, this is how we're going to show up in this space. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. So the presiding officer preserves order and decorum during the City Council meeting so that everyone feels safe and welcome, comfortable, and respected. So to participate in this meeting, participants applied to give testimony online. So if you did not apply and you'd like to give testimony to council, please submit that testimony in writing at portlandoregon.gov/CBO. When testifying, please state your name for the record, but your address is not necessary. You can declare if you're a lobbyist, and if you're representing an organization, please identify it. Each person will have 2 minutes to testify, and you'll be timed by staff. When your time's over, you'll be given a verbal warning and then muted when 2 minutes have passed, just to make sure that we have as much time for participation as possible. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or refusing to conclude your testimony when your time's up or interrupting others' testimony will not be allowed. If there are any disruptions, a warning will be given, and then any further disruption may result in the person being muted or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. So thank you for making all your fellow Portlanders feel welcome and comfortable, respected, and safe. So again, just to clarify, today we're going to be listening to public testimony, both invited testimony as well as open public testimony. And this really helps to provide information to our decision makers to inform this budget as well as future budgets. So before we begin, I'd love to hear some open remarks from our council. First, hearing from Commissioner Ryan.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm always startled that I go first during the last quarter of the year now, the last quarter of the fiscal year. So thank you. Good morning. And first, I want to wish everyone a happy Passover, happy Easter weekend, and we're also in the middle of Ramadan. So perhaps this is a really fitting day for us to listen and reflect. I'm really grateful to be here with all of you who took time out of your day to share what matters most to you as me and my council colleagues work on next year's budget. This budget cycle, I'll remain committed on supporting our city's top 3 priorities for their strategic investments in homelessness, community safety, and economic recovery, with an active lens on both racial equity and climate justice. With limited resources we are allocating this year, my focus is on filling gaps in housing continuum, helping our homeless neighbors get services they need, successful housing, and creating more affordable homeownership opportunities, investing in the city's public safety transformation efforts with a sharp eye on the integration of our first responder system that's in motion, and improved handoffs for services, and advancing opportunities that support the city's economy, including a resourced permit improvement transition team to ensure a successful transformation of our permitting system, and building these much needed decades delayed reforms where we've had some top-down solutions that have just failed. So this is an effort that we must continue to see through, and we have great momentum. So thank you for coming to the table. I value your input as we create a budget, a map, if you will, that moves Portland forward. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Hardesty.
Good morning, and thank everyone for spending Saturday morning talking about the city's budget. I will say, as I normally say, the city's budget is a moral document, and it really is supposed to reflect our values and who we believe we are. For me, this budget continues to I want to make sure this budget continues to address community safety and all the ways that community safety shows up. I want to make sure that all Portlanders are able to live with dignity in our community. And I want to support my colleagues to make sure this sense of urgency and creativity in addressing our houseless issues on the street. We know that when people are treated with dignity, we get better outcomes. And I look forward to this budget reflecting our values as humans and how we treat each other. And then I look forward to us doing some healing after all the trauma we've experienced over the last 2 years. But first, the budget. And I look forward to hearing your input and your vision on how all of us come back from this pandemic. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Mapps.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mengus Mapps. I'm one of your commissioners on Portland City Council. I'm the commissioner in charge of the Water Bureau, the Bureau of Environmental Services, and the Bureau of Emergency Communications. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day today to participate in this discussion about what our next year's budget will look like. I am eager to hear about community concerns. But before we begin this conversation, I wanted to place the city's fiscal situation into some context.
This meeting is being recorded.
Especially for folks who are just tuning into our budget discussions. You can think of the city as having resources that fall into 2 different buckets. We have one bucket for ongoing expenses. This is the bucket that we might use to hire new employees. And then we have a separate bucket for essentially one-time expenses. And you can kind of think of this as being a grant, which will not exist a couple of years from now, but we do have some dollars that we can get out right away. I hope everyone realizes that this coming fiscal year, we have very few dollars for new ongoing expenses. I believe that dollar amount is somewhere around $200,000, which is roughly enough to buy an employee and a half on an ongoing basis. That is a serious constraint on the options we have. The good news is we have significantly more resources for one-time projects. I think many of the projects that we fund this year will have to fall into that category. I hope that you keep that in mind as you dream about what we can accomplish in this next year's budget. I look forward to hearing your ideas and working with the community to build a budget that is right for Portland. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for being here on a beautiful Saturday. For the past several weeks, we've been reaffirming our council priorities and carefully diving into the budget to ensure that we're in clear alignment with what's important to Portlanders and also our values as a city. And now it's that critical time where we need to hear directly from you. Your voices are critical to our next budget discussions and help us further shape and prioritize this next year. And we know that we're up against a challenging time as we emerge on the other side of the pandemic, but still our big challenges remain, and our priorities then also remain on houselessness and housing, community safety, economic stability and recovery, and for us also climate and racial justice and arts. So as we dive in further today, I want to thank you for caring about our community, for being here, for speaking your truth, experiences, and priorities today, because we need them for the next set of deliberations. So we're here to listen and learn, and so that we can take action and move our city forward. So again, thanks for being here.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Mayor Weiler.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. Jen, thanks for facilitating today. And thanks to all the Portlanders who've joined us to testify or tuned in to listen to this session. And I realize this is a busy weekend. I want to wish everybody a happy Easter and Passover and Ramadan. We thank you for being here today and giving us your input. I look forward to hearing differing perspectives on how to best address the issues that are deeply affecting our city. It's no secret to any of us who are here on a Saturday that, like many other cities all across the United States, we've been working really hard to recover from the social and the economic repercussions of the COVID pandemic. We've been working to learn from the transformative social justice movement we've witnessed over the last several years. And at City Hall, we're working with our partners at the county and the state level to address the mental health and substance abuse issues that we know are contributing and making more serious the chronic homeless situation in our city. We've had a very rough 2 years. I don't think anybody can doubt that. But in the face of these challenges, I have to say this. I'm really proud of Portlanders. Portlanders have continued to be compassionate and resilient and resourceful and forward thinking. We're in the midst of what I believe is an important period of transition for the city. And I want to be clear what I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for ways to return the city to the Portland of 2019. I want us to really lay the foundation to the Portland that we want to see 20, 30 years from now. In our fall and spring budget adjustments, as some of my colleagues have noted, we made significant investments to address what we have collectively identified as our city's most pressing issues: homelessness, community safety, and economic recovery and prosperity. We've been, and we should continue to invest in ways that lay a foundation for that Portland that we want to see in the years ahead. I will be developing my proposed budget to continue building on that vision, and your input is important. So I look forward to hearing from all of you today. Thank you again for being here today. And Jen, thanks again for facilitating for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor Weiler. Next, I'm going to hand it over to our Budget Director, Jessica Canard, to give us a Budget 101.
Thank you, Jen. You could pull up the presentation, please. It is a pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you again as well on behalf of the Budget Office for everyone for taking time out of a busy and happy holiday weekend. My name is Jessica Canard. I am the city's budget director, and I'm going to take just a few minutes to briefly walk through the structure of the city's organization, our high-level budget, and what we're looking at in terms of forecasted resources this year. Next slide, please. So the city is one of several jurisdictions that are providing important services to Portlanders. You see a number of them on this slide here. Of course, the county, Multnomah County, Washington County, and Clackamas County are all part of the fabric that supports Portlanders, providing human services, public health, libraries, assessment elections, district attorney, and other services. TriMet, of course, is our provision of bus, light rail, and commuter rail service. We have also our unique metro government, which helps us plan for the future in the Portland region. And then, of course, our public school districts are important jurisdictional partners. So we really are just one provider of key services in a complex array of public services serving Portlanders. Next slide, please. Within the city of Portland, these are our key services that we provide. So you see, we have the Bureau of Transportation that provides traffic maintenance of our roads, our traffic signals, parking, streetcar. It does not manage the, again, TriMet manages sort of the bus system, but we manage locally owned roads. Then we have our public utilities, which includes the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Water Bureau. Our public safety is a large area of service that we at the city provide. It includes our Portland Police Bureau, Portland Fire and Rescue, our 911 call taking service, as well as emergency management services. We have Portland Parks and Recreation, which has, it's a single bureau, but has several functions and services as listed on this slide. We have the Community Development Service Area, which is comprised of several bureaus within the city of Portland. It includes our permitting function, and through the Bureau of Development Services, it includes planning for the future and our sustainability wing, Office of Community and Civic Life, as well as the Housing Bureau. And we are partners with the county of Multnomah County to provide homeless services through the Joint Office of Homeless Services. And then we also have the Office of Community Technology. And then we have our city support services, sort of the back end services and the engine that keeps all those frontline services running, and includes our management and finance, our attorney services, government relations, budget office, and special appropriations. Next slide, please. So when you look at the total city budget, we have almost a $6 billion budget. This is our revised budget as of last month. But a number of those resources are funds that are not part of our annual operating budgets. So you see our public utilities is the largest piece of the pie when it comes to our overall budget at about almost $2.3 billion. But that's because both of those bureaus have very large and substantial capital and infrastructure plans to support sort of our water and our sewer systems. So they build up large balances as part of their capital planning process to pay for large capital projects. So it is not the operating budget for our public utilities, but it is the total budget that helps maintain and take care of our water and our sewer systems. And then you can see sort of the distribution of the other of our budget across the other services on this slide. Next slide, please. So something that I always like to share when we talk about our budgets and it comes time for budget decision making is that we spend a lot of time at the city talking about the use of our general fund discretionary resource. And that's because discretionary money can be spent on with discretion by our elected officials. It doesn't have to be dedicated to specific purposes. But it's important to remember that the general fund discretionary is only about 10% of the total city's budget. So while I expect today we will hear from many of you requesting that the council allocate resources in a certain way, I just think it's important to remember that really when we talk about the general fund discretionary, we're just talking about one piece of the pie, and there's a lot of really great and important work that's happening with dedicated resources, things like our bond funding, our levy funding, fees for service, our water and utility and sewer rate payer dollars. So just like to share that. And then if you can go to the next slide, you can see this is how, when we talk about those discretionary resources, about $600 million worth, this is how those resources are distributed. And this is where you see a large amount of the discretionary resources going to our public safety services, predominantly for the Portland Police Bureau and Portland Fire and Rescue. And then that is followed by our community development services, which actually the largest portion of that is it's a transfer to the county for Joint Office Homeless Services, as well as support for civic life. Our planning and sustainability function are the larger components of that. And then again, you see Parks and Recreation as well up there as a significant piece of our general fund discretionary pie. Next slide, please. So Commissioner Mapps already gave a really great overview of our general fund forecast for this year, but just to make sure that everyone knows sort of where we're at in terms of available resource, I'll reiterate that we do forecast over a 5-year horizon for our general fund to make sure that when we allocate resources, if we allocate them for ongoing programs or needs, that we will have enough money to retain those services for at least the 5-year horizon. And so when we look over 5 years, we look at our revenues over 5 years, we look at our expenditures over 5 years. And if we have money that we anticipate to be available for all 5 years of that forecast, we call those resources ongoing. And those are the resources that are available to be allocated to things like ongoing people and programs. If we have resource that's available in the next year, but is not anticipated to be available over that 5-year horizon, we advise the council to only spend those things on one-time things, pilot projects, fixing major maintenance or other sort of capital projects, things that are not required to be funded on an ongoing basis. And so what we're looking at this year is, as Commissioner Mapps mentioned, around $200,000 in ongoing resource, so not very much ongoing resource at all. But we are looking at a decent amount of one-time available resource with $28 million. I will say here that the city has a financial policy where half of that one-time resource should go to our major maintenance backlog, funding critical major maintenance and safety investments in our transportation system for parks and for emergency response. So 14 million will be available as discretionary for council to spend, and 14 million will go to capital set aside. Next slide, please. We also are thankful that we have the opportunity to spend American Rescue Plan Act resources this year. So the city of Portland received last year as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, a total of $204 million. Council allocated $104 million in sort of a first tranche allocation last year. And in the blue letters on the slide, you can go to the website on the city's website to see how those resources were allocated by the council. And the council may choose to allocate the second tranche of $104 million of these federal resources in this process. And this is also a one-time resource. So we are looking at one-time expenditures there. Next slide, please. So that concludes sort of the brief overview of the budget. I want to be sure that we prioritize time to hear from all of you. But you can see here, if you would like more information, please visit our website. You may also email our office, and we look forward to hearing from you. I think we have one more slide that just says that there are more opportunities to testify. If you are watching from home and you'd like to sign up for our next listening session, please do go to our website and click on the link to sign up to testify. Next session is Monday, April 18th. That will be followed by a hearing on Thursday, May 5th. And then you can always submit your testimony via written comments on our MAP app or by sending us an email. So thank you and look forward to hearing from you, and I'll turn it back over to Jen.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Canard, for that grounding. The next session of our listening session is to listen to invited community testimony. So council office is connected with some community members to ensure that we're really hearing from a diversity of voices during this listening session. So our first testimony of this morning is dedicated to that invited testimony. And then following this, then we'll open it up and we'll hear open testimony from the public. So just to reiterate, you're going to have 2 minutes to testify. My colleague, Jeremiah, is going to be our timekeeper. And then also, if you look on your screen, you'll see blue sky timer. That timer is going to help you see, where we are in the process. So it's the same timer that you may have seen during council sessions. So when our timekeeper says time at 2 minutes, please just go ahead and conclude your comments. You'll be given another warning at 10 seconds after, and then again at 20 seconds after. And then beyond that, we'll just ask that you be muted and just conclude your remarks. If you're joining us by phone and you need to mute or unmute, you can use that *6 button to be able to unmute yourself. So I'm going to have my colleague Jeremiah will give us the names and the order of who will testify next.
Thank you. First three for today would be Brenna Bell, Bob Turner, and Chris Sturth. Brenna Bell, please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Brenna Bell, and I am the Forest Climate Manager for 350 PDX. Last summer, more than 60 people died from extreme heat. Many deaths were in neighborhoods that were 13 degrees hotter than those that had abundant tree canopies. And a warming climate will just continue to decrease the canopy and increase deaths unless the city acts quickly to reverse this trend. Portland Parks and Recreation is requesting $3 million to plant 6,000 new trees over 2 years in East Portland and other high priority areas. This is great, and it could be better. Portland also has to invest in the long-term maintenance of both new and existing street trees. The city knows it has to do so. It commissioned studies in 2009 and 2017 that both concluded that the only way to equitably grow the canopy is to have the city pay for street tree maintenance, not adjacent landowners. But what is missing is a clear mechanism for acquiring the funding needed for annual maintenance costs. So in this budget cycle, we are asking that you earmark $50,000 of ARPA funds for a study that evaluates various financing mechanisms for the city to assume maintenance costs for street trees. Only after the city has evaluated funding mechanisms can it begin the important process of including this responsibility in future budgets. And time is of the essence. Portland's tree canopy is in decline, and climate change is making it harder for new trees to establish and existing trees to thrive. This small shift in the budget would make possible a large, overdue shift in urban forest management, which is necessary to both build climate resilience and save countless lives. We hope you can earmark that $50,000 of the requested $3 million in street tree planting to figure out how to do long-term maintenance on a consistent basis to make sure that every tree planted is a tree that stays alive for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenna. Next, we have Bob Turner.
I'm Bob Turner. I'm a resident of Portland for 20 years. I routinely walk several miles in an area between the Sail Road and 405 bridges, between the Willamette River and West 27th Street. I frequently observe agitated persons, but will not call police to deal with them. I'm a member of the Portland Borough Rotary Club, its Social Justice Committee, and a participant in the racial justice conversations of the Lake Oswego Rotary Club. I delivered 2 letters in July and August 2021 with 30 co-signers to each of you to support full funding for Portland Street Response, which you chose to delay without evidence of Portland Street Response effectiveness. That effectiveness has been obtained by Dr. Greg Townley of Portland State, who concludes with 9 recommendations, the first of which is expand Portland Street Response. I wish to express my continued strong support to Portland Street Response and for its current budget requests contained in decision packages DP 13131, DP 13143, and DP 13144. In these linked decision packages, Portland Street Response is asking for $8.8 million for 2 years to fund citywide 24/7 expansion. This budget request is reasonable. The $8.8 for $2 million for 2 years is about 3.7% of the total of the Portland Police budget's $240 million latest budget request. One can anticipate that PSR operating 24/7 citywide will result in more than a 3.7% reduction in police response. Portland Street Response can now respond only when a person is in crisis outside or in public indoor space. Portland Street Response has more expertise in dealing with suicidal individuals than Portland police officers, so PSRT should be authorized to respond to calls from apparently suicidal individuals. The 2 individuals shot and killed by Portland police officers this year in 2021 both had mental health issues and probably would have benefited if they were contacted by a mental health care provider and not an armed police officer. Sending the right responders to the right calls with the right training is the best way to meet the needs of those who are suffering in our streets. And as Mayor Weiler has said, the expansion of Portland Street Response citywide is simply the right thing to do. Thank you.
The next 3 we will have will be Maurice Rahming, Leila Hadju, and Ed Arinello. For now, we'll have Chris Dirth.
Good morning. Mayor, commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Chris Dirth, and I'm a 30-year resident of the Multnomah neighborhood. We take great deal of pride in our neighborhood and the vibrant village business district. Today, I want to speak briefly in support of budget items funding safe rest villages, alternative shelter, and hygiene stations, all important pieces of our collective efforts to address the housing crisis. I'm proud that our neighborhood will soon be the home of one of the planned safe rest villages. Speaking with my neighbors, I find that we all want to do what we can to address the housing crisis in Portland. This is one small way we can do that in our neighborhood. I'm a member of the Multnomah Neighborhood Safe Rest Village Work Group, but I want to be clear that I'm speaking only for myself and not for the work group as a whole. Our group is working hard to draft a good neighbor agreement with the city and other interested parties to ensure the safe operation of the village and the safety of the neighborhood. We know that safe, affordable housing is the ultimate goal for everyone, but not everyone can just be handed the keys to a new place and be ready to live there. Our Safe Rest Village will be one means to support our houseless neighbors in achieving that goal. The need is urgent. I've been volunteering at Sisters of the Road Cafe for several years, and I see firsthand how challenging this issue can be. There are no easy answers, but I'm grateful that the city and county are working together to address this critical need. I'm especially encouraged that All Good Northwest was selected as our shelter operator. They bring experience, compassion, and a demonstrated ability to work with communities. I and several of my colleagues from the work group will go visit one of the sites that All Good manages this afternoon. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you and support this important budget item.
Thank you. Next, we have Maurice Ruffing.
Hi, Commissioners and Mayor. Thank you for having me. I'm Maurice Ruffing, owner of O'Neill Construction. I'm part of the DRAC. I worked with the Permit Improvement Project, and what we did there is we looked at trying to make sure that the decision-making process was quicker, that we involved a series of stakeholders, both from the community, from the developers, and also from city staff. I was excited about participating within this committee, and also looking at both Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Mapps continually to attend with the bureau heads. I believe that what the task force has created and what the potential that it can do is to streamline the process, to have a better customer service model. We went through it. It was very intense as far as making sure that we did it right. One of the things that I am excited about with it is the input that we got from other areas to see what they do right and be able to incorporate that within our city. And just the engagement of the city staff. I commend the staff, and I commend the commissioners on the willingness to change the process to make it work for not only the city, but also the end users, the developers, and so on, so that we can have a more vibrant city and be able to move this process forward in a more efficient way. I look at it as an investment and not an expenditure, because we are investing in a better way of doing things in the city, making it easier and more transparent for everyone involved. I don't think I need the 2 minutes, so I'll end it there. But thanks again, and look forward to supporting this.
Thank you. Next, we have Leila Haju.
Hi, good morning, all. My name is Leila Haju, and I serve as co-chair for the Coalition of Advisory Groups, or CAG. And that is comprised of advisory councils that are community-based, and that includes African American, Muslim, Asian, and Pacific Islander, Behavioral Health Unit, Latino, Slavic, and Training. We meet monthly with PBB for the past 2 years. In the beginning, we met every other week. CAG's mission is to strengthen understanding through communication support and, where applicable, collaboration among duly recognized police advisory groups in the city of Portland, enhancing their ability to act as an avenue for collective community input to the PPB and city leadership regarding policies, directives, and programs involving public safety. Our top concern is with shootings. From January through March, 390 shootings were reported, where 144 of them was in March alone. The Portland Police Bureau is down to a historic low of about 780 sworn officers, losing about 200 officers since 2020, and about 65 are planned to retire in July. Recruiting for new officers will take about 18 months of training, and on top of that, we have daily reports of shootings at an all-time high. With PPB's lack of ability to respond timely to priority calls that are life-threatening and the inability to get new officers on board now, our only option is with PS3s. An officer can offload much of the time-consuming task to a PS3 that does not require police authority. We have heard positive reports from community about PS3s. They are able to respond more quickly, walk through the situation with the person, and cultivate better relationship with PPB. We recommend investing more into PS3s. We also would like to see more ethnic, immigrant, refugee communities given the opportunity to be hired on, acting as a cultural bridge with minorities. Thank you for giving me this opportunity on behalf of CAG, and I hope this was beneficial to you.
Thank you. And the next two would be Jesse Hyatt and J.W. Matt Hennessy. For now, next we'll have Ed Arinello.
Morning. Thank you for listening today and being so open. I'm here to speak mostly about the safety from a health aspect and a personal aspect and the security of our city. We need immediate security and safety recovery. The health standards are below par. Human feces, human waste everywhere, the drugs, the addicts. I'm here to speak to this issue. I am here to say that we can support the homeless recovery situation if we arrest this issue, because right now, at an over 70% rate, our customers are not returning to the Portland area. And we need an investment in the immediate recovery that's necessary to show them and illustrate that we are taking action, to prevention of further crimes, to response times that get us in the 4 to 6 minutes that are necessary to arrest the individuals that are creating this havoc. And we need follow through on this prevention so that we can dig deep into that root that is destroying our city. The investments that are necessary that we're making on our own that we cannot sustain in cameras, security, bars, gates on our doors and windows, personnel, security investments is exhausting. The security of the security that's provided by non-emergency response teams is necessary. The police cannot handle what we have at hand. We need to partner these two even stronger and invest in what is necessary. The resources in pure manpower are too much reduced to arrest the issue and to move us forward. So I'm calling for an investment in the services and businesses needs that will get us there, that will get our Portland metro area customers and population back into the city, where they will actually help recover the return to work efforts that they are not motivated to, and the return of our city to a place people love to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jesse Hyatt.
Good morning, Mayor Weiler, and good morning, commissioners. I'm going to talk fast because I wrote too many words again. My name is Jesse Hyatt, and I'm the Executive Director of the Black American Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to talk this morning about the much appreciated and much needed City of Portland support we've received along with our Community Chamber Coalition partners. During the pandemic, our organizations were a support system for those that we serve, providing assistance and relief. One of the many challenges nonprofits face is just that, no profit. This means that before a position is created or before any program is launched or expanded, funding must be located and secured regardless of the need. Recently, the Mayor's Office and City Council voted in a one-time budget allocation to help support our chambers, and the impact of this has been significant. Here are some of the highlights that were shared with me. The Black American Chamber has been able to hire its first dedicated program manager and has funding to supplement 2 part-time positions opening this June. This has increased the number of businesses we can serve in the region by increasing the amount of programs we can staff and manage. The Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber funds are currently being utilized to support economic development work to benefit the underserved populations they serve, with a focus on the local Hispanic community. Some of the bolstered areas are building capacity for their business development team, deploying additional outreach campaigns to increase awareness, and using funds to add or retain staff, providing improved or new services. The Philippine American Chamber was able to supplement 2 positions, a key leadership position and a communications position, which has allowed for an expansion of services and awareness of services to the business community. In addition, they have been able to invest in staff training and development and internal systems. For the Oregon Native American Chamber, this funding has significantly contributed to the strengthening of their operations and their communications platforms. They have brought on non-program staff that focus solely on ensuring that their resources and services are communicated to their community of professionals, entrepreneurs, and stakeholders across the city and region. The local multiplier effect is a term economists use when describing the increased impact of a dollar spent locally and recirculating versus not spending locally. The City of Portland's investment in our organizations is much the same, in that the true impact goes far beyond the initial dollar amount invested. We and the businesses we serve thank you for that.
Thank you. And next we have JW Matt Hennessy.
Good morning to the mayor and city council. It's great to be with you this morning, and I want to start by thanking you for doing a great job of investing as it relates to the issues of gun violence and stemming it systemically in our city and our community. I want to say that those of us who are impacted by it, people who are traumatized by it, we still need you. We still need your courage. We still need your investment. And I would ask you to continue to do that, funding such things as prevention programs, the upstream programming that's gone on and helped a number of different community groups, and also the Office of Violence Prevention and many others. I also ask that you continue to invest in measures that will reduce gun violence, such as what happened with pulling together the FIT team and having the community oversight group be very much a part of what they do so that the mistakes of the past are not repeated. And I think it's been great to see the work that has gone on there with the focused intervention team, the enhanced community safety team, and the ability for there to be investments in training to improve response, to look at your budget from a standpoint of what can be done with more sworn officers, but also non-sworn officers and mental health workers and street workers and people who work in the parks and recreation, and to do it sustainably. We're not in this recognizing or seeing it as a sprint. This is a long-term issue, and I would ask you to continue to do what you have done courageously and continue to be the courageous leaders of our city to make sure that what we do is reduce and eliminate the violence that plagues us. And I'm here as a partner to help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all of our speakers. We are, very grateful that you came and provided your invited testimony. So thank you for this portion and our invited guests. Next, we're going to open it up to be able to hear from the public for folks who sign up ahead of time to give open testimony. So we have a lot of testimony, and we have some really important topics to cover. So just to remind everyone to kind of keep it to that 2 minutes when you hear that timer to wrap it up. Respectful communication. We want to make sure that this is something that folks can listen to later, and it's really fit for a general audience. If you're in violation of any of those rules, I'll give you a reminder. And then if the behavior continues, then we'll just go ahead and mute folks. But, hopefully we're all here to provide respectful communication and make sure that everyone who's in this event is able to speak. So just like our invited testimony, open testimony will have 2 minutes, and you can watch that blue sky timer to see where we are. If you can conclude your remarks when you hear that very loud bell, that would be wonderful. If you continue to speak beyond 2 minutes and 30 seconds, then we'll just automatically mute. If you're joining us by telephone, if you just want to push *6 to mute or unmute yourself, that's how we'll be able to hear from you. So I will hand it back to my colleague Jeremiah to read off our names. Thank you.
Jen? Our first three will be Annie Campestani, Nancy Chaplin, and Walter Weiler. Annie, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Annie Capistani. Portland needs to do more regarding carbon emissions. It is too late for small steps. We need big measures. The city needs to take concrete action to decrease emissions by 10% annually. And of course, that means the city needs to budget more money for this effort. Instead of wasting money catering to car users, the city should be making car use inconvenient and expensive, thus incentivizing people to use public transit, ride bikes, or walk. We do not need more freeways or wider bridges unless the extra space would be used for bikes and transit. They're not directly related to emissions. We should also spend less on the police and dedicate more money to rental vouchers for homeless people who are greatly impacted by extreme weather like this week's snow. Back to environmental impacts, the city should support Portland Audubon's land use proposals and policies, including increasing wetlands and blue carbon sequestration areas, finalizing the floodplain resilience plan, and increasing funding for greening and restoration projects. We all know that climate change has a greater impact on communities of color, which have been marginalized in so many ways. For example, East Portland, which has fewer trees, averages about 13 degrees hotter during the summer than wealthy Portland neighborhoods with lots of shade. With that in mind, I strongly support the Parks Department's plan to plant more trees in East Portland, but the plan also must include removing barriers that make it difficult for residents to maintain new and existing trees. The city should dedicate the $50,000 mentioned earlier for a consultant to determine the best way to fund long-term street tree maintenance and tree-related sidewalk repair. We can't just plant trees and think the job is done. We must make sure the trees survive. Tree maintenance is a small but important part of what should be a major investment in increasing climate resilience. Planting new trees and protecting old trees is vital to keeping people alive. But as important as climate resilience is, the most important thing is cutting emissions at least 10% a year. The city has to spend more money on this vital issue.
Thank you. Next, we have Nancy Chaplin.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity to provide input on the city's budget for next fiscal year. My name is Nancy Champlin, and I'm the Executive Director of Southeast Uplift Neighborhood Coalition. We're one of the 7 district coalition offices supported by the Civic Life Bureau to foster civic engagement among Portlanders. I'm here today to urge you to restore funding to the small grants program and to dispel the myth that these funds only go to neighborhood associations. Southeast Uplift shares the city's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. In fact, it's core to our programming. We are guided by a DEIA code of ethics and an equity lens tool that guides our decisions, as well as the kind of projects that we invest in through the small grants program. In March of this year, we awarded $61,000 in small grants to incubate grassroots ideas that address community needs led by and in support of our most marginalized neighbors. For example, the Equitable Giving Circle, a Black women-led organization that provides food to BIPOC families, sending care packages to elders, and distributing school supplies to youth. PDX Women of Color that creates meaningful experiences and community for self-expression of Black and Brown women. The Unity Football Training Program that guides youth of African descent to create place and cultivate positive social skills through soccer. Educate Ya that eliminates the barriers that Latinx people experience in accessing healthcare during the pandemic. And Conscious Growth to support a speaker series that will provide a platform to showcase presentations from inspirational BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ speakers. $61,000 may not be a lot of money to the Civic Life Bureau budget, but it means so much to these organizations and the many others that bring forth creative ideas and caring ideas for how to support and engage the most vulnerable neighbors during this time of great suffering in our communities. Please support the small grants program. and restore it to the District Coalition Office's budget for next fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Walter Weiler.
There we are. Can you hear me?
We can.
Ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, I am Walter Weiler, a resident of downtown Portland. In 2013, Parks and Recreation spent 27% of its budget on maintenance. Since each of you has operating responsibility for various bureaus, you already know maintenance is an essential operating expense. It's not discretionary. Lack of maintenance leads to deterioration of assets and increased expenses. Parks currently is spending only approximately 21% of its budget on maintenance. And in its 2013 report, the City Budget Office criticized Parks for its maintenance plans. One more. In addition, the Downtown Neighborhood Association has been asking for over a year for a tree maintenance plan, only to be told that there is no such plan. Before you approve additional funds for the parks budget, I urge you to consider two things, very simple. Number one, I encourage you to insist that parks restore maintenance funding to levels that were thought necessary and comparable to what they were in 2013. And number two, to create and publish tree maintenance plans. Now, briefly on different subjects, I urge you to consider positive progress on budget items that directly relate to the sense of personal safety that Portland citizens feel about living in our city. Number one, improve unreasonably long 9/11 wait times by adding 5 additional dispatchers and 2 quality assurance specialists. And B, unloading 9/11 call volume by expanding non-emergency 311 call funding. Second, and finally, improve the effectiveness and efficiency of our police force. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to be with you today. All the best.
Thank you. The next 3 we have is Wendy Ram, Virginia Halaby, Kate Dixon. The first we'll have is Wendy Ram.
Actually, the order should be Virginia Ellaby first, Wendy Rom second, and Kate Dixon third. We have coordinated testimony so as not to repeat.
Okay, thank you. Virginia Ellaby.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Good morning. For the record, my name is Virginia Ellaby, and with the next 2 speakers, I'd like to address, just as Walter did, the question of the underfunding of maintenance at parks. Like other Portland residents, I consider our park system to be one of the city's great treasures. And as a volunteer at the International Rose Test Garden, I know tourists share that view. But as a retired federal government economist, I worry future generations will not get to enjoy our splendid park system fully unless the Bureau's long-standing maintenance shortfalls are promptly remedied. Unfortunately, swift action looks unlikely. 2+ years after parks officials warned at a council work session that deferred maintenance could force the closure of 1 in 5 existing park assets by 2035, the Bureau has yet to unveil a detailed plan for unwinding its estimated 500 million major maintenance backlog. Not only has Parks policy response been lethargic, its commitment to preserving existing park assets appears half-hearted. Even as the park system has grown, the share of budget expenditures earmarked for maintenance of parks, natural areas, and facilities has dropped by 10 percentage points over the last decade. In contrast to the diminished emphasis on the maintenance of aging park assets, the Bureau has made full funding of maintenance at new parks a priority in recent years. A joint Parks City Budget Office memo last year, for example, I will turn it over to Wendy.
Thank you. I'm Wendy Rahm. Allowing parks to wait until parks' sustainable future funding plan is finalized before moving decisively on the major maintenance backlog is likely to prove costly and risky. The Bureau's minimalist approach has contributed to a 50 million rise in the backlog since 2019. That increase could push up the price tag of Parks' eventual sustainable funding package and prompt Portland's increasingly cranky taxpayers to reject the plan. Should that happen, the council is certain to face an array of thorny budget and policy decisions. These are risks the city need not and should not run. To help diffuse these risks, council members should collectively insist the Parks Bureau treat maintenance of existing assets as a genuine policy priority rather than merely a rhetorical one. To provide parks with enough policy leeway to begin paring the backlog of this fiscal year, the council should approve the proposed budget note on page 9 of the CBO look back link that would permit the Bureau to pay for some capital maintenance projects being unspent general fund discretionary resources. At the same time, please require the Bureau to provide periodic updates on its use of such funds and on its progress in reducing the backlog. And now I pass it to Kate Dixon. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mayor Weiler, commissioners. I am the third person in this system of testimony about the importance of tree maintenance in our city. Close scrutiny of costly plans is by the Park Bureau is equally vital. To keep the price tag on the eventual sustainable funding package as moderate and responsible as possible, council members should press for a maintenance-centric plan, focused exclusively on eliminating the current backlog, which you've just been hearing about, and providing adequate funding for maintenance of the park system in coming years. In addition, council members should carefully review the Bureau's estimate of the number of new parks needed to achieve an equitable level of service throughout the city. A gap between the Bureau's numbers on Portland's residents enjoying easy access to parks and natural areas and figures published by the Trust for Public Land suggests the Bureau's capital growth plans may be more ambitious than necessary. Crucially, the Bureau only counts its own assets in its tally. The Trust for Public Lands measures may be more appropriate because it takes into account other publicly accessible open spaces, such as the Metro-owned properties. You may be reluctant to adopt such an all-hands-on-deck approach to park issues given the other demands on your time. But without your active involvement, many existing park assets are likely to fall victim to benign neglect. Please do not let that happen. Preservation of existing park assets must become priority for the Parks Bureau and the city leadership. It matters deeply to many Portlanders. One evidence of this is the recent outpouring of public support for returning the complete Thompson Elk Fountain to the plaza blocks. Thank you very much, and for your attention to tree maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three testimonies you will have today are from Melody Valdini, Elizabeth Klein, and Laurie Palmer. Melody Valdini, over to you.
Hello. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Melody Baldini, and I work downtown at Portland State University. And I'm also a mom of two young girls who love to ride their bikes. I'm not a member of an organization. I really am just here as a mom who is here to ask to please allocate more money to protected bike lanes in our city. And in general, more safe and protected bike infrastructure. This year, my children and I tried an experiment. We tried biking to school, to and from school every day. And it's been really nice. We thought the rain would be terrible, but actually it was kind of a bonding experience. It's been really nice. But the thing we didn't expect is even though our journey to school is only on residential and school zone streets, a journey that should be very safe and quiet, we deal with drivers who are speeding, who are distracted, and who are angry every single day. We cannot share the road safely with these drivers. They are not paying attention and they are going way too fast. So I'm here today to ask that you add more protected bike lanes in our city for the safety of children who are biking to school, as well as the safety of all the bicyclists. And in addition, I want to note that this achieves another one of our goals, which should be a top priority of the city, which is slowing down climate change. As you're probably familiar from the IPCC report, we are in a now or never situation. We need to start to incentivize people to ride their bikes, to take public transit, and to do all sorts of things that will slow down the heating of the earth. If we can make these changes quickly, then we can limit the heating to just 1.5 degrees. If we can't, then the outcome will be catastrophic. Thank you for your time. I'll prioritize safe bike infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth Klein.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Klein, and I'm a Portland resident and a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. As you all know, gun violence is a public health crisis here in Portland. Gun violence in Portland has been on the rise since before the pandemic, and in 2021. Portland had a record year of gun violence with more than 90 homicides, making it the worst year of gun violence since 1987. To prevent gun violence and to support survivors of gun violence, Portland needs to adequately resource the Office of Violence Prevention by fully funding OVP's $5.4 million funding request through the use of American Rescue Plan funding for the coming fiscal year. The Office of Violence Prevention works to intervene and prevent gun violence, builds community resilience, and creates a safer Portland. Importantly, the Office of Violence Prevention works closely with community-based organizations to increase their capacity for gun violence, intervention, and prevention. This is so important for our city. Critically, the office works to address gun violence through an equity lens, providing support and resources to Portland Black and Brown communities who you know are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. The requested $5.4 million budget from OVP sounds like a lot of money, but it will pay to expand mentoring programs, street outreach, and community intervention programs, and additional services and supports for survivors of gun violence. Supporting funding for community-based and locally led violence intervention programs is a priority for Moms Demand Action. These programs are a critical tool for reducing violence. I hope you will consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Laurie Palmer.
Good morning, everybody. I didn't know I signed up to speak, but I will speak. I am the founder of Go Get Your Child Community Violence Prevention Coalition, and I asked the City Council to continue the budget in the efforts for prevention for African American BIPOC community. That is the area that I'm working with, and also the park budget is very important. I plan on doing pop-ups in parks, so that budget needs to be restored as well. We got a violent problem here in Portland, Oregon, and we need all hands on deck, all finances on deck, all programs on deck. So continue your good work, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. The next three testimonies we will have today are from Michaela Mccormick, Kathy Reese, and Diane Mason-Helter. First, we will have Michaela Mccormick.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time. I'm here to talk about climate change. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report says that we need a major decline in carbon emissions by 2025. Accordingly, the city needs to have concrete yearly steps to decrease emissions by 10% annually. The city is currently budgeting a paltry $720,000 to address the underlying causes of the climate emergency. It is crucial that it commit sufficient funds to reduce emissions to the level prescribed by the IPCC. On the issue of transportation particularly, transportation contributes 40% statewide to carbon emissions. The city needs to stop freeway expansions, electrify public transit and the city's own fleet, create infrastructure to support electrified vehicles, not allow TriMet to purchase additional diesel buses, and lower public transit costs, especially for low-income people. Also, the city needs to push at all levels of government for aggressively funding bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, including funding and creating policy to retrofit all existing neighborhood greenways to meet the current standards of 1,000 cars or less a day. Expanding the Bike Town for All program to more Portlanders and fund outreach and encouragement programs. And finally, working with the state legislature to create income graduated bicycle traffic violation fines. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathy Reese. Kathy, are you able to unmute or press *6 if you're on phone? We will go to Diane Mason-Helter first.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can.
Okay, thank you. 2 years ago, Council declared a climate emergency, and yet we still have no concrete policies in place to substantially reduce emissions. Last week's IPCC report is clear. Emissions must decline no later than 2025, or we face unthinkable consequences. The city needs to come up with annual concrete steps to reduce greenhouse gases by about 10% each year. To do this, you must include more than the measly 720,000 slated for emissions reductions in the climate emergency declaration. The city needs sufficient funding for both decarbonization as well as climate resiliency, and the current budget proposals favor the latter as opposed to the hard work of actually quickly reducing emissions. There are plenty of action models, and the city right now needs to determine which concrete steps can be taken next year and then budget accordingly. The IPCC report lays out a roadmap for policymakers on what you can do and the solutions you need to invest in. If you'd listen to your qualified staff, the Portland Clean Air Protection Program, one of the first programs under the CED, was to put a price on carbon in a polluter pays model, but it never even made it to a vote due to industry pressure. Now scarce general fund monies are being requested to focus on education about the health harms of pollution without the incentives designed to actually stop it. The city needs to move forward on its own carbon shadow pricing plan and not cave to industry pressures. Living a block from Alberta Street, I can attest that the Healthy Business Program should not be considered emission reducing, as there is no guarantee that folks will not drive to these outdoor restaurant locations. The new BPS director should have experience in designing and implementing successful emission reductions policies, or better yet, create a new department with emergency powers charged with quickly implementing sufficient actions. As elected, you must lead and do the right thing, deeds, not words. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Danielle Maillard, KL Johnson, and KPTV News. Danielle Maillard. How about KL Johnson?
Jeremiah, sorry to interrupt. Somebody in the chat said they were having troubles with their unmute.
Yeah. Kathy Reese, are you wanting to testify? Sorry, I saw your message and wasn't quite sure.
I think Kathy said that she's not planning on testifying. She's just observing. And I think so actually there were a handful of folks that had signed up, but we're not seeing that they entered the room. So I think that actually concludes our testimony.
Awesome, thank you.
So turn it back over to Jen.
Great, thank you all so much for this testimony. It's wonderful to see this level of public participation on a Saturday morning. So thank you all for coming and giving your testimony. Next, we're going to move to having some closing remarks from our council members and mayor. So we'll start with Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Portlanders, for showing up on a Saturday morning on a pretty busy weekend, and many people are with their families this weekend. So I really appreciate it. I just want to say in real time, I was taken by it seemed like the majority of the testimony on climate concerns. I'm not the only one I'm fortunate to have plant life outside my house. And since that snowstorm that caught many of us off guard in terms of the severity on Monday, I'm not the only one that went out there at some really early hour shaking off wet snow to try to salvage the devastation. So, when we look back at the heat bomb and then this recent condition, it's right at the beginning of the budding of plant life, and it's just the worst time to have a severe condition. So it's so relevant to so many of us at this moment in time here in Portland. So thank you for the testimony and for your passion, and also some very concrete delivery on what you expect from us. Your comments continue to strengthen my commitment to investing in these solutions. And I also heard, of course, about people's passion around helping our homeless neighbors, as well as implementing next steps for community safety and advancing the work to ensure that we have economic recovery for the long-term vitality of Portland. We've got to improve our reputation for sure on how we serve our customers that want to invest in Portland. I am requesting additional American Rescue Plan funds to help more Portlanders receive services on the ground that will lead to safe and stable housing. There's sometimes these, I think, extreme false debates about shelter versus housing. I think many people know that it's about services first And it's how we can creatively innovate and get the services directly to those who are on our streets, and really innovate for the entire state, because our state is lagging for decades now in terms of resources for mental health and behavioral health. And much of what we're experiencing, unfortunately, is that crisis. And we also have families, a lot of families that are on the verge of being homeless. We have people who want to age in place that are on the verge of being homeless. So we also have innovative strategies that could be more specific to those audience. My point is, it's not a one size fits all. And the continuum from our streets to home ownership is something that all of us on this council care about. And I specifically have assignments that allow me to focus on that. And I collaborate with all my colleagues. I'm also working to fund the community safety system investments. We've agreed during the PPA Association, Department of Justice negotiations, including proper data management for body-worn cameras. So I wanted to lift that up. And we all know these investments are steps in transforming our community safety system. Finally, I am advocating for the expansion of permit improvement transition teams to implement reforming our broken permitting system to make things more streamlined and effective, as one of our testifiers mentioned. And so we can have effective and efficient system to stimulate our economy. And we've done this before, and we have to learn from our mistakes of the past when we focused on this. And so I really appreciate the many internal employees that are engaged. We're going to expand that. I've learned when you're doing system change work, if you don't include those on the ground, then it just fails. And so I'm looking forward to the comprehensive, all-in nature of this reform process. And we will be better prepared to serve the community's needs as we recover and move forward throughout, as we hopefully are moving out of the extremes of the pandemic. I look forward to working with all my council colleagues as we finalize next year's budget over the next coming weeks. And it certainly helps so much to hear from all of you. I look forward to more of these sessions. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Hardesty.
Again, I want to really appreciate everyone coming out today on a Saturday morning to talk about the city budget. I also want to appreciate people who spoke about climate change and the reality that we have to do things radically different if we're going to have an impact. As the transportation commissioner, that has been a top priority for me, including investing dollars in unsafe quarters of our city, highlighting crosswalks so that people of all abilities can utilize those. My budget request asks to support small businesses by continuing to be able to use the public right-of-way for businesses to be able to thrive, as well as community plazas that create car-free areas so that community members can gather. Community safety continues to be a top priority, and I've asked for dollars to invest in community-led solutions like we did in Mount Scott, Loretta community, because the community has the answer to the problem. And I'm looking forward to helping government get out of the way so that community can actually work cooperatively on these really important issues. When we talk about the biggest issue on our plate, housing and houselessness, we need everything. It is not an either or, it is everything. We need to support small, individually managed villages like Right to Dream 2 and Dignity Village, and allow people the dignity. We need to actually allow people to be able to camp safely on land already owned by governments. We need to actually make sure that we're thinking outside of the narrow boxes that we've been stuck in for the last, for a long time. And again, I want to put money into the hands of small business owners who have been absolutely devastated, rather than in planning for what's possible for the future. We have community members that are just desperate for resources. I want to end by saying I also appreciate people talking about our parks. Our parks have a maintenance backlog, but just like parks, PBOT has a $4 billion maintenance backlog that started under the Honorable Vera Katz. And so I want to just ground people. And Commissioner Rubio and I are not just resting on our laurels. We are attempting to address a legacy of deferred maintenance that we enjoyed when we showed up at City Hall. I look forward to the next budget meeting on Monday evening at 6:30, and I look forward to us continuing to build a budget that's based on our values and our vision of who we're going to be as we start coming out of this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Mapps.
I just want to thank everybody who testified today. This morning, I heard calls to improve our public safety systems, to make new investments in violence prevention programs. We heard numerous Portlanders call for improved services to the houseless community. And very much in the same vein, we've heard many people come together to call for this council to fight climate change. I think in a related track, we also heard about the importance of maintaining our parks and our tree canopies, building better bike lanes, and building a better permit system. I support all of those goals. I hope and am hopeful that those projects will be reflected in the final budget adopted by this council. And I look forward to continuing this conversation next Monday night at our next budget listening session. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Rubio. Excuse me.
Commissioner Rubio, we can't hear you or see you.
Perhaps we can go to the mayor. I think something might be happening. Oh, there she is.
Looks like she may be frozen.
Yeah, I think she might have some technical or internet difficulties. Should we go to the mayor and then come back to Commissioner Rubio?
It was a good frozen picture, though.
Oh, there.
Oh, is it frozen still?
No, you're live now.
Okay, you're frozen to me, but I'll go ahead. But thank you. I'm sorry about that. First of all, I'd like to appreciate Director Canard, Jen, and the team at the City Budget Office for setting up a process that enables us to listen to community in our budget process. And I also want to thank the community who've testified today. This is my second year participating in the budget process, and I've been looking forward to these listening sessions because until a couple of years ago, I was the one providing testimony like you are at various budget hearings. So I'm clear about what my job is here, and that is to listen and learn and consider these voices in our decision-making. But the bottom line is we need to budget to the values that I know we hold and meaningfully engage with the community as we do that. And a few things that I heard today that resonated are first, the support for tree canopy and also tree maintenance, continuing the work in government permitting efficiency, ending gun violence and increasing community safety, continuing the support continuum for our houseless community, which includes services, shelter, and housing, and also ensuring our business community has the support they need. Again, to continue neighborhood grants, safer and protected bike lanes and bike infrastructure, and then finally urgently addressing climate emergency through investment. And to those who testified on climate change and tree investments, these are both top priorities for me, and I greatly appreciate your advocacy and agree that we need to do more as a city. And I will continue to push to make our commitment visible through meaningful investment. But I also want to make it clear that we need to do this in partnership with community advocates, with private and public sector partners, so that no one is left behind and that we can make permanent gains in climate mitigation and resilience and not Band-Aid solutions. So I'm hopeful that even in this time of multiple challenges for the city, we can produce a city budget that shows movement in many, if not all of these things. In the meantime, I look forward to continuing to do my part to bring what I've heard today into our budget dialogues with our staff and my colleagues in order to move us forward. So thank you again for coming today.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Commissioner Rubio. Next, we'll hear from Mayor Weiler, and then I will just conclude with another plug for our next listening sessions. Mayor Weiler.
Good. Well, thanks everybody for testifying today. I appreciate you coming out on a Saturday, and I especially appreciate your time, your feedback, and your thoughtful suggestions. I wrote down many things that people had specifically mentioned, but sort of the three broad buckets that I saw here. The first was around safety, and particularly around gun violence, and making sure that we supported the Office of Violence Prevention and community-based strategies to engage people who are impacted by gun violence. I heard a call for more police. I heard calls for alternatives to police, including enhanced Portland Street response, as well as an enhanced 311 non-emergency system to deflect calls from the police to other first responders who might be more appropriate. A lot of testimony around addressing the homeless crisis on our streets, the safe rest villages, hygiene stations, and other important efforts to help those who are on our streets. And of course, like my colleagues, there was a great deal of interest and urgency around climate change, around the environment, some of the packages that the parks had put forward on the canopy and other areas. All of these are important areas. Of course, the work of the council isn't to fund everything, because we cannot fund everything. And so it's really about prioritizing. And so the more we hear from you about what your priorities are as a community, it is our job as elected officials to be responsive to those needs. I also just want to be clear on this point of scarcity, that I need to put the dose of reality here, because the proposed budget will not please everybody. There is a scarcity of resources that we're working to allocate for this coming fiscal year. And just to give you some sense of that, again, I want to go back to the slide that Director Canard put up. We have $200,000 of projected new ongoing revenues for this next fiscal year. We had very little carryover from last week's spring budget session. At present, we've received between 2 and 4 times the forecast available resources in terms of the proposals that you've seen. There's about 200-ish line items, and not all 200 of those line items are going to get funded, because we simply can't print money like the federal government. But we are working hard to build a balanced budget that meets the urgent needs within the councils and the community's shared priority areas of homelessness, community safety, economic recovery, addressing our climate concerns, and the input we received today, as well as on Monday, as well as the feedback we received through emails and other sources, will definitely help guide my decisions as I work to finalize and bring forward the proposed budget in the weeks to come. Again, just thanks for everybody for taking a little time out of your day today to share your thoughts with us. I personally really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Weiler. Just before we conclude, I want to remind folks that we still have 2 additional opportunities to hear public testimony. Our next one will be on Monday, April 18th, and that's from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And just a note for that Monday session, there is a deadline on Monday at noon to sign up to provide testimony. So if you can go to the city website, again, that's portlandoregon.gov/CBO, and sign up to provide additional testimony. That would be wonderful. We want to hear from more folks during that session. And then there will be an additional session on Thursday, May 5th from 6:30 to 8:30, and that's the mayor's proposed budget hearing. And so you can provide testimony at either of those events. If you want to provide written testimony at any time, you can do so on the city's website. Again, that's portlandoregon.gov/CBO, or you can email testimony directly to budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. So we are looking forward to hearing from folks on Monday. And Mayor Weiler, I will hand it back to you.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank you, Jen, for doing a great job of moderating today. You're very organized and thoughtful, and we appreciate that very much. I want to thank Director Canard and her budget team for walking us through the details of the budget process and making sure we get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. and the unsung heroes at Open Signal who show up and make all of this technology work for us in an era of Zoom. So thanks to you good folks as well. Most importantly, thanks to everybody who testified today. So colleagues, with that, there being no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you all.